Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. It is Friday, April 15th, and that means if you're here in America and you haven't paid your taxes, better get to it pretty quickly.
Paid mine this morning, Jeff.
I'm a sales coach and trainer. I've worked with salespeople for 48 years now, and I help salespeople and the companies they work for get measurable and sustainable sales increases. And I founded the Sales Pro Network as a place where salespeople can come and hang out, network with each other, ask questions, get great coaching, and on every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, we do either a live interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales, or I do a live training. And today, we've got an expert in the world of sales and sales management. It's my pleasure to introduce you to my new friend, David Weiss. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm outstanding, my friend. How about yourself?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this, David. Could you maybe start out with giving us the 2 to 3 minute version of your background, what brought you up to this point, and then we'll get into some great questions?
Yeah, I've been in sales leadership for about 15 years. Spent a lot of that in the Fortune 250 space. ADP was about half of that career. Left that to kind of pursue the dream of becoming a head of sales of a startup. So joined the startup space with Outreach. Then moved over to Seismic, lead as a RVP with them, and then most recently, hit that milestone I was going for, and I'm now a head of sales for a seed round startup called LeaseUp, trying to transform the property tech space, and we're pushing for our Series A by the end of the year. So super exciting. On the personal side of things, I'm a New England guy living in Texas, so I live in Houston. I moved down here. I was tired of snow and shoveling snow and, high cost of living. So I live on the lake. My hobbies are boating and cooking. I've got an 8-year-old son who's home from school, so he may say hi. His name is Ian. And yeah, man, that's me.
Wow. And you also help salespeople. Besides at your company, you have programs and systems for salespeople. Let's start out with what is the MedPick framework? And that's MEDDPICC, MedPick. What is that?
Yeah, totally cool. So MedPick started in the 90s as Medic, and then it moved to MedDick, and now it's MedPick. But it is essentially a gap analysis checklist. It is a way to sit on top of your deals and look at them. So I've been using that framework for about 10 years. I was a pretty good, write it plan to, slightly over plan, sales performer. I implemented MedPick literally when the year I implemented it, I did 180% of my number. Then they raised my number. I did 220% of my number. Then they promoted me and were like, you're making too much money, go lead a team. I took that team and they doubled their sales from the year previous, and so on and so forth. And then kind of the rest is history. So I run a masterclass on it at medpick.co. And I've been teaching people that for 6-7 years now, hundreds of sellers. I can go deeper into it, but the whole idea is you've got MedPick, which is metrics, that's the business case. You have E, which is the economic buyer, the ultimate decision maker. You got your first D, which is decision criteria, customer's wish list. You got your second D, decision process. That's their process to make their decision, their buyer journey. You've got the P, which is paper process. That's all the legal sort of things. You've got the I, which is identify pain. And you've got the 2 C's. One of them is champions. Do you have them in your deal? And the other one is competition. Whole thought is those are the fundamental elements of every single sales opportunity you'll ever work. How do you then look at your deal, say, are you red, yellow, or green? Red, I don't have the information. Yellow, I do. Green, I've got it all, and it's really lock solid. That is when you can say, okay, I'm confident in my deal. So it's a way to look at it, break it down into those components, and then do a little gap analysis, blind spot check to see how you're doing on the deal.
Wow. So I always say that sales is both art and science, and it sounds like you're helping salespeople to make this more of the science, which is I think we should all do.
Yeah, I mean, look, art is rarely repeatable. I think it's one of the reasons it's art. Then you've got science, which should be repeatable and scalable. I like to bridge both. So I'm a big fan of the art and the science and bringing them together. But to me, that is like my underpinning of the science side. Yes, absolutely.
Got it. And by the way, if you're watching us live, please say good morning in the comments. If you have not connected your Facebook account to StreamYard, we won't know who you are. So if you haven't done that, please, if you say hello, then put your name in there. If you have any questions for David, toss them in the comments also. I'll get them over to him. And if you're watching us on the replay, please put replay in the comments. One of the topics I hear all the time, in fact, the thing that I find most salespeople struggle with the most is prospecting. And when it comes to prospecting, you talk about tiering your accounts. What is tiering and how do salespeople use that?
Yeah, no, great question. So early on in my career, and when I worked with salespeople, I just attacked my whole book of business. Cool. I just literally go down the list. And your bottom of the list and your top of the list, there's not necessarily any difference. In fact, your bottom of the list could be all your gold, your top of the list could not be, and you could just spend all your time here. Like, you just don't know. And when you're attacking your entire prospecting list, you're going to run into accounts that are smaller, that maybe not be perfect fit, but there's some degree of interest, but then they're going to suck up hours of your time every single week for months and months at a time. So you don't want to tell anybody no. You want to be a nice guy. You want to kind of run the process with them, see what happens. But while you're doing that, you could be doing things that could lead to a higher degree of success, and frankly more revenue for both you, company, more wins for your client, all those things. So tiering is the idea of, how do I spend the most amount of time where I can get the best return for my investment? So the thought there is, you've got either tier 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C, however you want to do it, either a 1 or an A, whatever you want to do. That's essentially like your top, and you could have 25 accounts, you could have 1,000 accounts, so it kind of depends, but that's your top like 10% of your book. Those are your accounts that you are going to know better than they know themselves, read all their annual reports, read every news article, do your deep homework on every member of their executive team, map their stakeholders, high personalization, lots of calls, handwritten notes, gifts. Like those are the ones that you are leaning in really, really hard on. Then you've got your Bs. Those are like the next 20 to 30% of your accounts. Those are the ones you're going to do some personalization, you do some of what I just said, but you're going to kind of dial it down because that's a higher volume of that. And then you have your C accounts, which is essentially everything else. And in your C accounts, you're more throwing them into automated, sequences using a sales loft or using an outreach or, something like that. And you put them through a year-long sequence where they get a touch every 2 to 3 weeks. And you vary it between, your first one's normally personalized. You vary it between like bump touches, adding value, different things like that, asking for meetings, and you just deploy it all that way. So you naturally are going to get the most amount of meetings with your A's or B's because that's where you're spending the most time. And then your C's are just going to find you, and they may express interest, they may not, but you're not putting in a lot of effort to get those meetings. You're putting in an effort where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And that's the whole idea of how you tier and why.
That's great. So how does a salesperson, especially perhaps an inexperienced salesperson, go about actually figuring out, how is somebody an A, B, or C? How do you figure that out before you actually start prospecting to them?
No, great question. So, you kind of want to look at like these matrix of factors. Some of the easiest ones: how big is the account? So how many employees do they have? What industry are they in? Are they inside your ICP or not? Do you have like case studies, or do you have competitors that are like them? Then you're going to, and this is a little bit more advanced based on research, so it just takes some time. Then you're going to like, do they have a problem you can solve? So like, have you read in the news or their annual report or something like that, where they're saying they're trying to grow or do something or have some sort of initiative that they're publicly putting out there? Like that's an automatic, great one. Relationship mapping. Like, has someone from a current customer of yours moved over to this new account? Does one of your executives, or do you have a relationship? Does someone have a relationship? So you're kind of mapping it that way. So you're looking at these like combination of factors that you are personal to you, that you kind of look at and say, okay, based on these things, yeah, this one meets all of that criteria as a definitely A account. B, and then you start going like, smaller account, not as many relationships, not in our ICP. Okay, that's more of a C.
Yeah. So for an example would be, for me, selling sales training, selling that to a company that has 2 salespeople is a waste of my time and a waste of their time. But a company that has 100 or 1,000 salespeople, that's much better. So for me, that would be an A. That's what we're talking about. Yes.
That'd be an A, or maybe it's a B, and the A is the one where the head of sales. Yeah.
Got it. You also, by the way, good morning, Steve Kent. Good to see you, my friend, as always. Good morning, Michael North. He says it sounds like a great process. Mark Lawrence, good morning to you, sir. And Lisa Linker, excellent to see you. She says, good morning, Jeff Goldberg and David Weiss. You mentioned the term bump touch. What is a bump touch?
So bump touch is that you send this, it doesn't exist in marketing, which is why it works so well. It's that touch in between your email. So your email is normally like, hey, love to talk to you about these things, and this is the impact we have, and we're great at this stuff. Can we set some time? or you're like, hey, I want to add some value to you. Here's an article that you can read, blah, blah, blah. Those are all what I consider more commercial. They're marketing could have written it. What marketing never writes is, hey, did you get a chance to read what I sent you? Are you available Tuesday at 2 o'clock? That's a bump touch. A bump touch is simply, let me bring back the thing I sent you, draw attention to it, but then quick one liner. Do you have any interest in this? Can we schedule some time?
Love that.
Yep.
I find that salespeople often waste a lot of time, not only in prospecting, but also in the sales process itself, which is why I believe that an effective pipeline management system is so crucial. My belief is that the typical salesperson, which is something we never want to be as far as I'm concerned, they treat every prospect that they're working on equal, and they're just not. Do you have some methodology that you can share with us for figuring out and I'm not talking about in the prospecting mode. I'm talking about you're actually engaging with a prospect before they're trying to get them to become a client. How do you ascertain, here's one I should really be putting my time into, and here's one that I should invest less time into?
Yeah. Do they have a problem I can solve? When do they want to solve it? Do they have a active initiative, or is it just a single person exploring? Is there a team around it? How well does my solution align to that problem they're trying to solve? As an example, Jeff, like you'll run into tons of deals, and this is to me where your more sophisticated sellers like really do some deep work and spend some real time with their customer, or potential customer. Is they're like, hey, what do you want a solution? The customers may say like, oh, we're just looking to do this. It's like, well, hold on a second. Like, let's peel the onion on that. Let's have more conversations around that. Let's build a scorecard that says I really need these 10 or 15 pieces of functionality to be able to really solve this problem correctly. You're not selling on feature function, but feature function is what solves problems. So you try to really understand the problem and then the feature function to accomplish that. And you get really well aligned on it, because where some salespeople get happier is like, oh, they want to buy, a CRM, and we sell CRMs. It's like, well, there's a lot of like nuance into the CRM space. There's a reason why Salesforce owns, 95% of the market, then HubSpot, then Microsoft, and then everybody else. So they've figured something out there. So the thought is like, do you really understand their buying criteria? And then do you really know how well you align to it? Because if they're looking for 10 things and you sell 5, well, you're misaligned, and you either need to find a partner to close that gap, or if you sell 10 things and they want 5, they're a more immature buyer, and when you eventually get to cost, every one of those 10 things when they need 5 costs more than they're likely it's going to cost 2x than what they need, what a competitor may have. So you're misaligned on the criteria in which they're trying to buy and how you solve, and that's going to cause some sort of friction at some point in the process, either price or or you not being able to fully meet the need. And if you don't really understand that, you're going to spend a lot of time on a solution that you probably can't win, or can't win in the way you want. So like I look at a lot of those different factors between the people and the solution and all that, and say, okay, how well aligned are we here? Where we're more aligned, that's great. Where we're not, maybe be upfront about that, and work with them at a later date, or cut bait and run, or what have you.
Got it. I'd also throw in, are they actually engaging with you? To
Sure.
me, one of the most basic things, and I suggest the most important thing I share with salespeople, is you never leave a meeting or a phone call without setting up the next meeting or phone call, what I call the best next action step philosophy. And, if somebody's engaging with me, if they're responding, if they're returning my emails and my phone calls, that's somebody I'm going to invest more time with than somebody who goes dark for 2-3 months at a time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And if they're going, 2-3 months at a time, it's not real. It's not an active initiative. It's not a real project. Or there's misalignment, and that's you. It's often, the root cause of some of that stuff. So
yeah. But unfortunately, salespeople, in my experience, often they're chasing them over and over, calling every day. Hey, I'm just calling to follow up. Hey, I'm just calling to follow up. You do that 17 times in a row. And to me, what that really means is, hey, did you decide to do business with me, but forget to let me know?
Sure. Yeah, normally there's a degree of like misqualification there, or not asking the right questions, or getting happier, is not digging deep enough. There's a lot of root causes to that, and I think a lot of our job as good sellers is to figure out what are the root causes of things, so we can then respond accordingly.
Yeah, well, I think one of them is that most salespeople do not prospect enough, do not prospect consistently, and
Yeah.
do not prospect well. To me, I suggest that solves almost every sales challenge. That
Yeah.
if you see enough prospects, you're going to close some. Now, that's not a recipe for huge success, but the first thing is you've got to be look, even with all your skill and experience and your methodology, you can't close enough business, and neither can I, unless we're speaking to enough prospects. Because I don't know about you, but for me, some people actually say no. In fact, more people say no than yes.
Pipeline cures all problems. Yep. No doubt.
Exactly right. And I know you also talk about mental health in sales, and that I think that's an important topic because most of us face massive rejection on an almost daily basis. So how can salespeople deal with that, especially newer people who may not be used to it?
Yeah, rejection, burnout, toxic work environments, unfair situations, constant change, counting on a big deal and losing it, not getting the promotion you want. There's a lot that goes into it. So my wife has her PhD in psychology. She is a mental health coach for salespeople and also runs her own private practice doing more, actual, coaching and therapy. I have a degree in psychology. I've been surrounded by psychologists my whole life, mostly because I'm crazy and they help me. I like to tell people that I married a psychologist to save money in the long run. But I'm a big proponent of it, and one of the main reasons I'm a big proponent of it is I've gone through periods of what I call severe burnout, like where I'm a very high energy, love to work with people, love being around people. I consider myself a traditional extrovert, and I've had really terrible, and I mean terrible, like abusive bosses throughout my life, and other things like that, where no matter how hard I worked, it was never good enough. And no matter how high the number was, it was never good enough. And it would just cause this like need for hustle and overwork and under like balance and burnout and all those things. And there were points where for 3-4 months, I just didn't want to get out of bed, and I like didn't want to see anybody or talk to anybody, and my performance, dipped dramatically. So I've personally like gone through that struggle, and I've learned, now like when I choose jobs based on the boss. I can make money anywhere. Who do I want to make money for and with? I make sure to take time. I make sure that I end my days on time at specific times. I balance my energy levels on my calendar. So I never do like 10 draining tasks in a row. I try and like I'll do one draining, and then I'll do one that lifts me up. And I know my natural energy and levels and rhythms and all those things. But all those things are so important because for the basic fundamental thing is like, you were kind of just saying it with pipeline. It's like, I don't care how good you are. If you aren't with it, if your mental health isn't strong, you can't use your skills and your brilliance because you just can't connect those two dots because your head isn't in the game. And like that to me is why mental health is so important, is we have to have that balance so we can actually, perform at the levels we want to. So yeah, I'm a big fan of mental health. If you've got some severe things, please seek therapy. If you got some kind of minor things, like, get some coaching. At the very least, just build some work-life balance for yourself so you can kind of maintain the performance over long periods of time.
Yeah. While it's not always true, it's often true that top producers are hard chargers. We go get it and nothing's going to stop us, and we have a great attitude. But I often tell people, I've never done anything except sales in my 48-year career. But the truth is, at one point, I did have that severe burnout, and I said, you know what? I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I can't take another day hoping that I'm going to make enough money, close a deal so I can pay my rent or whatever is going on. And I actually left the field of sales and took a job at Air Canada in reservations. Went through, I said, the pressure's done. I just want to sit and talk to people on the phone and help them book flights. And you go through 2 weeks of training. I'm sitting down at the console the first day, and in between calls, you can talk to the person next to you. So I said, how do you get a raise here? The guy said, oh, you'll get one automatically after 3 months. I said, oh, okay. How much? He goes, automatically 25 cents an hour. And I said, well, what if I do a great job? He goes, 25 cents an hour. What if I do a crappy job? 25 cents an hour. I raised my hand. The supervisor came over. I said, this job's not for me. I'm leaving, and went right back to sales. But we all have that time where it's like, I can't take it another second. And I'm with you. Yet having somebody else to talk to, whether it's a coach like you or me, who they pay to talk to them, or just somebody else in sales, to get that out there, because you can easily burn out. And if you're not at the top of your game, I always say this, sales is not an easy gig. It beats digging ditches in the hot sun. And I don't know that because I've never dug ditches in the hot sun, but it's mentally exhausting. Uh, you mentioned, and I saw this in doing my research about you, that you have a degree in psychology. Besides helping you to take care of that mental burnout, and of course, marrying someone who can do that for you, how does that degree in psychology, or how does your background in psychology help you in sales?
Oh man, I don't use the degree, but there are definitely some like basic fundamentals of understanding human nature and empathy and things along those lines. It's opened me up a little bit to some very light like neuro linguistic programming around like how do you ask a question in a way that gets someone to give you a better response. But there's we don't need to go into that, but there's just things like fundamentally sales is about solving problems for people. Psychology is about solving problems for people. Um, Psychology is about asking the right questions at the right times to get people to open up, knowing when to dig, knowing when not to, knowing, just it's a lot of that. So I think there's a lot of overlap. Now, what I was taught in school is very different than what I use, but there is some very basic principles of human psychology that apply to things we do every day.
Sure. Something as simple as how do you turn a stranger into a friend?
Yeah, sure.
Yep. I actually suggest that sales is mostly psychology. And I pay attention with my coaching clients to every single word they say, because I believe one word can be the difference between closing a deal or not, between making a friend or not, between finding out what you need to and not, or not. And there's a lot of psychology in there. And I haven't studied it like you have. I don't have a degree in it, but I say if you've got to understand how the human mind works in order to understand how to relate to prospects and help them choose to become your clients.
Yeah. The best sellers are curious problem solvers, in my opinion.
Absolutely, positively. I always say that, David. It's not about your brilliant presentation skills, and it's not about your strong closing skills. Those are both lovely to have, but I've worked with lots and lots of salespeople over the years who are not brilliant at closing and not great presenters. But the best salespeople, to me, always have three characteristics every single time. First of all, they are the very best question askers. Like you said, they're curious. They tend to truly like people, or at least they act like they do, and they're wound up to find things out. Like there's a TV show I love called How Things Are Made. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Oh yeah.
Brilliant. How do you make a tennis racket, or how do you make frozen waffles? I love that stuff. So if you're wired up curious, I think you're going to be a better salesperson by asking great questions. The second thing is, and most salespeople suck at this, you have to be a great listener. We forget that it's not about our great presentation. It's about listening to what the prospect tells us that they want, need, desire. And then, of course, I say you have to tell good stories. You have to be able to share a story about somebody else like your prospect who, by doing business with you, lived happily ever after.
Yeah, and then similar to psychology, when you're trying to help someone make a change, driving a degree of urgency. That's the one I would add. You can listen, you can hear, you can learn, you can ask all the right questions. But then what a great seller does is they then connect the dots to, wow, here's your current state. I heard all of this. Here's your ideal future state. I heard all of that. Let's quantify now the value of the change, and get them to move and understand that for every day that they don't solve that problem, these things are just going to get worse. And like that, to me, that's what great sellers do, is they connect those dots to that value of the future state.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a challenge, I think, for all of us in sales. How do we make the prospect be as how do we make the sale be as important to the prospect as it is to us? We want to get paid. We want to feed our families, and we want to put I forgot what you call it, your golf thing in your house. How do you afford to do all the things that you want to do? And you do that by solving other people's problems. But how do you create that urgency, or how do you help the prospective buyer to be in a state of urgency when it may not be urgent to them?
Yeah, it's funny. There's this concept to me of daily lost revenue or daily impact. So there's 250 business days in a year. What I like to do is current state, future state, quantify the value of the change. So say that your solution, you can agree with your customer, is going to generate them, $1 million a year. Let's just use a nice round number, $1 million a year. So I would take that, $1 million a year and divide that by 250. And, for every day they don't make a decision, they're losing $4,000. So, hey, I'm happy to schedule a meeting in 2 weeks, but in those 2 weeks, let's just multiply that. You just lost $56,000. So that's cool. So, I mean, now you start getting that. Now, it's not always about revenue. There's a lot of factors to it. It could be that, someone's working, 60 hours a week. Your solution could save them 20 hours a week. And, now they can get home to their family. So it's like, okay, so we can meet in 2 weeks, but if I solve this for you today, you can get home to your family tonight. Like, so it's kind of just figuring out what's important to them and then boiling it down to something that's right in front of them. When you start doing these grand terms, total cost of ownership over the course of 3 years, like, no one's thinking 3 years out. No one cares about three. I mean, they do, but think about climate change. Like, in 100 years, the world's going to explode. It's like, okay, well, no one cares about it. But if you can boil it down to, like, well, there's going to be a hurricane in your backyard because of that. It's like, okay, maybe I should, not drive as much. But the whole thought is, like, how do you make it real in front of someone right now, and them to understand that for every day they don't do this, this is what could potentially happen, that day or the next day or the next day, and the value of that. That's when you can start creating some immediate just urgency.
Yeah. And the only way you're going to find that out is by doing what most salespeople don't want to do, which is ask questions. Most people just want to tell their story. We love to present. And look, I'm a professional presenter. There's nothing I love better than a room full of people that have to listen to me talking to them about sales, but that's not how I sell. I always say salespeople don't get paid to speak. I get paid to speak, but not when I'm selling. When I'm selling, I get paid to ask questions and listen. And I think when salespeople get that basic concept, they automatically become better at their jobs. Um, what do you call a blind spot, and how does one recognize them in their deals?
That goes back to MedPick without question. So a blind spot is, by nature of it, something you can't see, something you are not aware of. And there, my wife, for me personally, is my blind spot, like blind spot detector. Like, I'll be in a human interaction with someone afterwards, be like, did you realize you did that? But she's HR. We were talking about that earlier. She's HR. She's like, did you realize that? So that's a blind spot. So MedPick is a framework to find your blind spots. It teaches you to ask all the fundamental questions of your deal, and then see where you are, totally weak, where you are, somewhat weak, and where you're good. And then it teaches you to know what to do about it. So you may think you've got a business case, but that business case may not be validated by the person that's ultimately doing business with you. It may be validated by, someone, lower on the totem pole. Well, you know what? If that's the case, it's a potential blind spot, because when you go and present your final solution to the person that's ultimately going to sign it, and they look at the business case that they've never seen before and never got a chance to validate, and they blow it up in your meeting, it's like, okay, well, you just set your deal back. Where you maybe could have closed the deal right now if you had met with that person and just had a 15-minute conversation of, hey, here's the value that we see in this. Do you agree with that? Instead, they're like, no, you have to go back and talk to all these people, or, this isn't a priority, or you're completely wrong. See ya. We'll do it next year. Like, those things happen all the time. So, like, that's a blind spot where people think they're good because one person said they were good, but the person that really needed to say they're good weren't good. So that's just an example of a blind spot. But the key with MedPick or any framework you want to use here is you need to look at your deal, like, objectively. You need to have a standardized measure to then look at it. You need to look at each of the components of it, and you need to be able to, based on that objective measure, say, am I really good in this scenario or in this piece of my deal, or am I not? And then, do something about it accordingly.
Got it. When I'm doing research, whether for an interview like this or to speak with a prospect, I'm always fascinated by various things. And yesterday I was looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile with a client of mine, a coaching client, because he wanted to sell to her and he couldn't figure out anything interesting. I said, well, look at this. She's interested in war games. I found that fascinating. What popped up into my mind was immediately the Matthew Broderick movie, War Games. I said, talk to her about that. There's something brilliant. And there was something that came up in yours, which I'm not sure what it is. And I'd love to know, what are solid battle cards?
Okay, so one, ask her to play a game of chess and call her Joshua. But do you want to play a game? Battle cards. So battle cards are ways that you can keep track of your competitive differentiators versus your competition. So a battle card may be, for instance, like, hey, ABC competitor is really good on this and this, so don't mention anything around that. But where they're weak is on this and this, and people buy us for these reasons versus them. So that's the concept of a battle card. And if you haven't built battle cards for your top competitors, that's one of the things I teach people to do. And so when you're in a competitive situation and you're like, hey, who else are you looking at? And like, oh, looking at these folks. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I always ask this question is, are you okay? It can be sometimes hard to see the difference between us and others. We all kind of sound alike after a while, and you see 50 demos, like they still all start to blend together. It's like, can I just call out a couple of the key nuances that align to the problems you're solving, so you can kind of see why we're different. And people will almost always say, yeah, that'd be fine. Like, cool. Well, look, you're talking to this competitor. They are really good at this. They are really good at this, this, and this. However, what I'd really suggest you do is dig into them with this and this. You're trying to solve these problems. They solve some of them, but where we solve this better is here and here, and we can do these over here. And I'd love for you to ask these couple questions to them to really make sure. They may say they can do it, but ask them how. Like, really dig into that. That's called setting a landmine. So when they go ask them how, and they realize, oh, no, you don't solve it the way these guys solve it, and I really like this way. And you know that through deep discovery and asking the right questions and all that stuff. And in theory, blows up in the competitor's face, and the deal shifts in your favor. You have battle cards for your key ones, and you kind of bring those things to light. You're not ever bashing your competition. You're using facts, and you're being an advisor, and you're pulling yourself back. And you know what? If the people they're talking to are really better, I'll tell them, look, I'd love to do business with you. Here's why you should do business with us. But if you're trying to solve these problems in this exact way, they do a really great job there. And I'm honest about it. So that's battle cards. That's how you use them. That's why.
Got it. If you've just joined us, you're either listening or viewing the Sales Pro Broadcast Network podcast and vlogcast. And we're talking to David Weiss, the head of sales at LeaseUp.co and the founder of the MedPick framework. David, what is testing your champion about? What does that mean? You have a lot of stuff that I was fascinated by.
No, totally cool, man. I love this stuff. So testing your champion. And I guess, Jeff, how many times have you heard a seller say, I've got a great relationship with someone, they love me?
Almost every day.
Almost every day, right? And how often does it play out where like that person that loved them, was just being nice?
At least 50% of the time, probably way more.
Right. So that's the idea of testing. A champion is someone selling for you when you're not there, and they're someone with likely access to power. They can be that person that says, oh, they love me. I've got a great relationship. I met with them for 7 minutes and I'm their best friend. Like they I guess could be that person. But the whole idea is, how do you prove it? And you prove it by saying, hey, before our next meeting, can I prep with you for this big meeting with all these people? Can you help challenge my hypothesis? Can you help me, speak the language of your business? Can you help me validate this business case? Can you get this business case that we just validated to an economic buyer so they can validate it with us? Can you get me a meeting with this key person I'm trying to meet with? Hey, out of curiosity, this person says they can sign the deal, but are they really the right person? Or is there someone else that's going to, get involved? You're talking to all these competitors. Where do we stand? Where are they better? Where are we better? Where are people not understand our solution? They're part of that decision committee. That's testing. You're asking those specific questions, and they're willing to stick their neck out and give you those answers. They're willing to favor you above others and give you insider information. They're willing to go to bat for you. They're in your corner. That's a real champion, and that's how you test them to determine that they are.
Got it. Yeah. Obviously, that's crucial. My personal philosophy, and this is just for me, and I know this does not work in every industry, is I won't talk to anybody other than a decision maker. So I'm not looking for a champion. I only want to deal with decision makers. But I also know that in many, if not most industries, you can't always get to the decision maker, and you do need that champion who's on your side, who can eventually get you to the right place. So I love that, testing your champion.
Yeah, and look, I'm a believer, like the modern sales environment has changed a little bit. Like, I like, if someone's selling to me, yeah, they should probably only sell to me. But if they're trying to, convince me to do something, they can get to my wife. This is more on the personal side, not the work side. And my wife's like, yeah, you should probably do that. I'm like, fuck, okay, fine. So like, the wife would be the champion. But the thought is, you have different levels of champions. Small deals, yeah, you may just deal with the decision maker or like one or two people. When you get to medium-sized deals, yeah, there may be a decision maker and then like 3 or 4 people. But when you're getting into like enterprise level deals, hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of employees, huge impact, there's going to be a committee, and that committee is going to be 6 to 10 people. And having a couple people in your corner that are saying we should do this, that's when that champion really comes in. So like, to your point, like we want to be selling to a decision maker, but man, I love this concept of surround the castle. If you can surround that decision maker with people that influence them to make decisions, you're more likely to win. So it's that thought.
Yeah, the thing for me is I find that too often salespeople are not even trying to get to a decision maker first. Um, it- my experience is it's incredibly easy to get appointments with people who can't do you any good whatsoever, and it's much harder to get in front of people who can actually make decisions. I
Yep.
say it's worth the effort, but again, my world is different than many. So, in an enterprise sale, quite often you do have to deal with a bunch of people, and having that champion is crucial. What's
But
the
to your
difference?
point, getting to the decision maker is key because if your competitor gets there and you don't, you lost.
Absolutely,
100%.
positively.
Yep.
What's the difference between being purpose driven and pressure driven?
Okay. So it's almost kind of like the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Um, Daniel Pink wrote a great book called Drive, and he talks a lot about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in that book. So being purpose driven is I don't give a shit about the outside world. I'm doing this for me. And I've gotten to a point in my career where I am very lucky, and I feel like I can be purpose driven, and that means I've quit organizations or quit bosses or made strategic changes in my life because I no longer align with those folks, and so I have my own internal purpose, and my why is helping the sales community and having these conversations and doing things to help sellers be better sellers. And I like doing that with people that are interesting and fun to work with, and that I genuinely connect with, and want to get out of bed and fight the good fight with them every day. That's my purpose, and that's who I like to execute that purpose with. So pressure driven is the exact opposite of that. Pressure driven is you haven't figured out your why, but you're fearful of losing your job, and it's your boss, it's your quota, it's the number, and those are the things that motivate you, and those are the things that drive you. The problem with that is what happens when you lose your job, miss your quota, or something goes wrong. All of a sudden, who you are crumbles because who you've attached yourself to being is those artificial things that other people are putting on you. That's where lots of burnout comes from. That's where self-fulfilling prophecies and downward spirals come from. But if you flip that narrative and you are purpose driven, screw everybody else. Doesn't matter what happens. I'm doing it for me. So like that's the difference, and that's the value of the difference.
Yes, I say that's the I don't give an F attitude. And look, I have a dog, and I always post pictures of him. I say he's the beach bug. He don't give an F. And in sales, you've got to have that thick skin, and you do have to know your purpose. And so many sales, look, my experience is that most salespeople just never make a lot of money. It's good for me as a sales coach because that gives me lots of prospects and clients. But most salespeople don't know their why, and they're not committed to being the best they can possibly be. Most salespeople don't go to a seminar, don't read a book, don't invest in themselves at all unless their company does it for them. And people are, oh, Jeff, you're a natural. Well, maybe I have some of the qualities that tend to make somebody better at sales, but I worked very, very hard in the beginning of my career to learn the art and science of selling. And I still read almost every book that comes out, and I still listen to every expert because I don't know it all. And there's always something else out there that's, we live in a world that's changing like this. You've got to be, if you're going to commit yourself to a career in sales, you might as well be committed to making a heck of a lot of money in it, because to me, that's the reason to go into sales.
Yeah.
I'm a college dropout, and knock on wood, I make a real nice living. And, of course, I love working. I love people, and I enjoy the interaction. But at the end of the day, most people don't go to college to go into sales. We fall into it by accident, but we stick around because there is that opportunity. But not if you don't invest in yourself.
It's interesting. It's a really great point. So I've often said to people that sales is the profession with the lowest barrier of entry with the highest potential earnings. And if you want to be successful in our profession, you should treat yourself like an elite athlete does, or any elite professional, which is, to your point, They read the books, they practice, they get coaches and mentors, they watch their own game film, they watch recordings of their calls. They dissect what they do well and not, and they're in a constant state of improvement. Like I love your bookshelf behind you, because like the one on the far left is John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I know actually I can probably identify a lot of the books just by because we've read the same damn things. And it's like you're only as good as the people and things you surround yourself with. And if you choose to be great, like you can make just tremendous earnings in this profession, and have a really amazing, fulfilling life. Or you can just go through the motions and not. I mean, frankly, the amount of time that you spend going through the motions is not that much more time than you spend to being great at it, if you are focused and do it right. So
Yeah, and exactly right. And I didn't have to go through 8 years of medical school or law school or anything else like that. I mean, it
my
really
wife
is.
did. My wife did. I make twice as much as she does.
Yeah, I mean, a top salesperson can often make more than a CEO, and often CEOs come from a background in sales. What about? I'd like to get your thoughts on AI, artificial intelligence. So many people are concerned that it's going to completely eliminate the need for salespeople in the future. I don't believe that. But what are your thoughts on AI, and how can salespeople use it now?
Oh man, I honestly don't have a ton of thoughts on this topic, except the fact that I dig the tools coming out, that I don't necessarily call them artificial intelligence. I'd call it maybe a little bit more along the machine learning side of things. Artificial intelligence to me feels like it requires humans too much still, and it breaks. A lot of people have actually been sued for using AI in the interview process, because guess where the AI learned its stuff? It learned from successful hires, and guess where successful hires came from? The same damn people that are already being biased on the hire. So you just teach the AI to be biased. So not so much an AI fan, but definitely a machine learning fan. And like there's some great companies out there that are starting to machine learning around like open rates on emails. It's like, okay, which subject line gets the best one? What length of email? What cadence and words and things? Like salespeople can absolutely use that. There's AI or machine learning around like helping people find prospects and serving those up at the right time. There's machine learning that's going on around this concept of battle cards. So like if we're on a Zoom call together and you ask me a question, I can have something pop up and say, hey, you should probably say this, or here's the information this client's requesting. So there's some really cool sales tech evolution things that are coming out and ways you can use it. But yeah, I mean, if you've got other really neat things that I don't know about, feel free to share. I always like to learn.
I just want to know what the best subject line is. If I could just have the answer to that one, I'd be a happy camper. Much like sales, marketing seems to be mostly throwing stuff against the wall, testing and measuring, seeing what sticks, and then trying again. At various times, you've been an individual contributor, a sales leader, a trainer, a coach. What part do you enjoy most, and why?
There's a lot of overlap between, in my mind, good sales leadership and coaching. I am no longer a salesperson. I have made this jump multiple times in my career. I've gone from leadership to seller, seller to back to leadership, leadership back to seller. And it was a handful of years ago that I did that again. And what I realized is I honestly don't really care if I win anymore. I care more if I help other people win. And to me, that was a really interesting, shift from a purpose perspective. We go back to that. My purpose isn't, me winning another trophy. My wall is literally stacked over there of them. I've made enough money for myself. What I really, really enjoy is helping other people win and being successful through their success. But from a coach and a leader perspective, they overlap a lot. I consider myself, a servant leader and a coach first, in the sense that I'm always trying to help develop people, help them, see blind spots, being there for them, listening to them. I often teach people that when you're in leadership, all those great things that you did to get into leadership, most of the time it's you were promoted from being a great seller to a leader. All those great things that you did as a great seller, press the reset button. You're now a leader. And as a leader, take all those tools and things you learned for your clients, point them at your people, do great discovery with your people, understand them, serve them. They are your new client. And if you treat them that way, they will love you. They will stay with you. They'll run through walls for you. You'll really understand them. You'll truly help them, just like you helped your clients. You're never the boss. Like you don't work. They don't work for you. You work for them. And that's why I love leadership. So yeah, I'm a leader. I'm a coach first. Yeah, my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. My experience is that sales managers are typically salespeople who've been paid everything they can get paid. They've won every award and contest. So, guess what we're going to do, David? We're going to give you a promotion. You're going to be a sales manager. And to the David in this example, it usually sounds like a good thing until you sit down at your manager desk the first day and you realize you don't know anything about managing salespeople. And
Right.
selling and managing are two incredibly different things. And I like the term you use, servant leader. If you don't truly like to help others, sales management is a very bad place for you to be, because it's an almost thankless job a lot of the time, unless you get great fulfillment from when people say, hey, David, that thing that you told me to do the other day, I tried it, I closed the deal, or I'm getting a promotion, or I made some, I'm assuming that as a coach that like me, I get those all the time, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like all the pain in the ass stuff that goes with it is well worth it, because salespeople, myself included, by the way, are mostly babies. We give me the good leads. I don't want the bad leads. And when I blow a deal, I want you to put your arms around me and tell me it's going to be okay. And when I close one, let's shoot off fireworks. Forget about hitting quota, just every single one. So it takes a certain type of person who really enjoys coaching, mentoring, training, and watching and helping other people succeed. And that's not easy to do. It's not for everyone.
And look, I sucked at it. I was terrible. Like when I first got into leadership, and I call it the sins of your father. Most leaders getting into leadership now are still being led by the leaders of the past. And the leaders of the past just screamed and yelled and held everybody accountable to numbers, and frankly were jerks. I like to consider myself more of a modern leader, and I think the leaders of my generation and future generations are learn that the world has now changed and how you treat people should change. And one of the things that taught me to be a great leader is that book I referenced on the far left there, the John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Teaches you how to lead as a human. And I really, really love that. And when I learned that, things changed for me. But I feel bad for the first early people I was leading. I was still doing it old school, and it didn't work well. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I met with a prospective client just the other day who was talking about making a change in their organization, giving somebody else the sales management role. There was a guy who's handling ops and sales management, all kinds of other things, and they realized brilliantly that this person is not giving the salespeople enough attention. So there was a young lady in the room who they were considering making the sales manager, and she made some comment, and one of the other people in the room said, brilliant. Yeah, she'll just nail him to the wall and she'll beat him into submission. And I said, wait a minute. I've been doing this for 50 years almost. And yes, that is the way we used to manage salespeople. That's just not the way it is anymore. You've got to be the cheerleader and the empowering leader. And you've got to come from really wanting to help people succeed. It's not about beating them into submission. That probably never really worked, but you and I both know that's how it used to be. I've worked for screaming, hollering bosses.
Yeah.
It never motivated me. In fact, I'm the kind of person, when you scream at me, I tend to retreat. I'm going to go away and I'm going to go, screw you. I don't need you.
Yeah. I yell back at you and then get fired and go somewhere else. So I think you're spot on with that thought. And yeah, things have changed. And by the way, if you look at the job market today, it is ripping hot. If you are a seller and you want a new job, you will get a new job and you'll get a 20% to 30% bump in pay. That. So you better treat your people right. Otherwise, they will get a new job immediately, making more money.
Absolutely, positively. One of the things I offer my clients is outsourced sales management, where I actually take over the sales management on an outsourced part-time basis. And recruiting right now, it's nearly impossible to recruit good salespeople. It is truly a seller's market. Yeah. They can command huge amounts of money, great benefits. And our friend Don Levine, who's a recruiter, is on this right now. He's watching. It's hard to find great salespeople, and unless you have something good to offer them. And being a screaming, hollering boss is probably not what they're looking for.
No, farthest thing from it.
Absolutely. How about prospecting? Any thoughts on best practices for prospecting today? Everybody has their own favorite method. I hear from lots and lots of people that, oh, cold calling is dead. You can't do that. Of course, I've always heard cold calling never worked. It won't work when the dinosaurs come back. It won't work when black holes follow the sun. But that's just one of many. Anything in particular that you're suggesting to your team, or is it a blended approach?
Yeah, so the tiering is huge. We talked about that kind of early on. So being able to tier your accounts and then apply the right prospecting mix to them. We were talking about AI and machine learning. If you're not using an outreach or a sales loft, I worked at outreach. I would highly recommend it. That's my favorite. But if you're not using one of those tools, if you're not measuring, like, let's go back to science a little bit. If you're not measuring success of your efforts, you're missing something because you don't actually know what's working, what doesn't. Great sales leaders, like I know if we put a certain amount of this level of activity at the top of the funnel, we're gonna set this number of meetings. I know that. I have the data to show it, and it's repeatable, and I can plug any seller into it, and if they just follow that playbook, they're gonna get that result. That is modern prospecting. A couple of just key things. Anybody who says the phones are dead are just scared of the phones, and they need to learn to pick them up. If you look at the data, and again, I worked at the #1 company in the world with over 1 billion data points on how to set successful meetings. This is not my guess. I have the data. I work there. Phones are the #1 meeting setter. Now, it's not phones alone. It is a combination of emails, LinkedIn touches, and phones, where your phone call that you're making is referencing and bumping the email that you sent. The email is providing context to the call, and the call is what then sets the meeting. #1 meeting setting is right there. Second one, it takes 8 to 12 touches to get a hold and set a meeting with anyone. So if you quit after 3, you're just failing yourself. Third, bump touch. Your bump touch is your #1. We talked about that earlier as well. So pick up the phones. Don't stop until 8 to 12 times. Use bump touches. Use data to fine tune the message, the subject line, the length, all of those things. That is modern prospecting.
Got it. Our member Don Levine says, as we move on in our lives and careers, everything we do should reflect our values, and we should be paid for our knowledge. With you 100%. And Peter Ekstrom, he says, this guy, David, is smoking. Peter is a big fan of cold calling. In fact, he wrote a book and teaches a program called the Gold Call. He's a master at it. So he and I are agreeing with you 1,000,000%. When people tell me that cold calling is dead or it never worked or it won't work, it just means you don't know how to do it. You weren't taught properly and you're afraid. Look, it goes back to that rejection thing. Yes, people are going to reject you on a cold call. So what? So what? Oh, Peter also says, use seamless AI.
I'm a fan of sales intel, but hey, use what works.
Got it. How about, here's the question I get all the time from prospective clients. Jeff, can you come and teach my people how to close? Now, my thing is always, you want me to teach your people how to close? Great. That's a 5-minute conversation. What your people really need to know is how to sell. But do you have a particular closing methodology that you like?
Hey, this seems to make a lot of sense. Do you agree?
I love that. I was hoping you'd say something like that because mine is just a few words more. Mine is, in my professional opinion, this is the plan that makes sense to me and what I believe we should do to move forward. What do you think?
Right. Yeah.
It goes back to psychology there. I think there's a lot of psychology in those few words because when I say to you, in my professional opinion, I'm coming out and telling you should listen to me. I'm a pro at this. And this makes sense. I believe we do everything we do because it makes sense to do those things, including buy stuff. So you're telling people, this makes sense. Do it.
The best closers, they've done good discovery. They've aligned that discovery to the problem that they solve. They've aligned how they solve it to their solution. They've built a business case around it that justifies that spend. They've gotten to the people, the person or people that can make the decision. They've explained to them why it makes sense. They've gotten them to then agree to it. And at the end of it, it's like, cool, well, something you'd like to do. I mean, yeah, it's only hard if you haven't done it right every other step.
Exactly right. And then, of course, the most difficult thing for salespeople to do if they come up with a question like that, is to do the hardest thing, which is shut up. Just stop talking and wait.
Power in silence.
Yep. Salespeople don't understand. By the way, you and I were chatting before, and I mentioned that, I do stand-up comedy. Same thing they teach you when you take a class in that. Silence is your best friend. It's not always about talking. Sometimes it's about shutting up and just waiting.
Yep.
Perfect. David, I'm going to share my screen now. Can you please tell people how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to, and if they're interested in the MedPick program?
Yeah. So hit me up on LinkedIn, David Bailey Weiss or David Weiss. It's right there at the bottom. I work at a company called LeaseUp. So yeah, hit me on LinkedIn. Best way to get a hold of me. In fact, Jeff even was kind enough to send me a couple emails before this, and I 100% missed him because I get too many damn emails. But he sent me a note on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, Jeff, I'm here." So LinkedIn is without question the best way. If you want to learn more about the MedPick framework that I talked about, meddpicc.co. And yeah, I'm here to help people. Like my ethos in life and what I wake up every single day, Jeff, similar to you, is just help sellers be better sellers. So if I can be a resource for you or help you with anything, or you have a question after this, please just reach out. I'm here for you.
Great. Yes. Well, thank goodness for LinkedIn, because I was panicking when I didn't hear back from you from my email going, is this guy going to show up? So, and that just goes to prove the point. Sometimes you've got to have multiple ways to get in touch with your prospects, because you never know what's going to work.
That's it. Jeff, thank you so much for having me.
David, thank you. Really, thank you for your time and sharing your brilliance generously with us. Any final words?
Happy selling. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks for listening. And again, if I can help you, let me know.
I'll agree with happy selling. Please, if you're celebrating a holiday in the next week or over this weekend, please have a great one. And I'll end this as I end everyone. Please remember that sales is a game of making things happen. So team, get out there and make sales happen. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.